Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Storied Church podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm so glad you are here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. If you're new and this is your first time here with us, I really hope you find your time with us meaningful. We would love to meet you and get to know you, and you can find a couple of ways to do that on our website at storiedchurch.org. It's storied, S-T-O-R-I-E-D, church.org, or you can find us on social media, and we would love for you to follow us on Instagram and or Facebook at Storied Church. We hope that our sermons and our ruminations are thoughtful and meaningful reflections that help us take our next steps together on our journey. Enjoy.
All right, so thank you, Elaine, for speaking the scripture this morning. So like Elaine said, this was last week, and then Saturday around 4:30, we found, I say we, I didn't. My cousins found my mom laying on the floor of her bathroom. She had been laying there for about 10 hours after taking a fall. You know how old people do. They break 9 ribs and, break a collarbone, break a shoulder blade, and those ribs hit her lung, and heart goes into AFib, and she also hits her head on the way down with the fall and has a slight brain bleed, but that's not the concern. That heals up, and they're just going to keep an eye on it. So thank y'all for understanding and filling in. And if you were here last week and you came back this week, kudos to the ones from last week that took care of business, because they didn't run you off and we didn't look like crazy people. So until today, when somebody brings out a ladder for a message, and now we look like crazy people. Whirlwind. That kind of 24 hours after, seeing my mom like that, going from Sanford Hospital, kind of a small town hospital, to her getting transported to Chapel Hill and being in ICU for the last week, and now she's still in ICU, but in a step-down unit, and so now they're helping her figure out how to manage pain, how to breathe again with, breathing, and also almost your entire rib cage broken. Trying to figure all that out, and then now talk about, where are the rehab centers, and how much is that going to cost? So I told God, I was like, just take me before all of that happens. I don't want to deal with any of that in my life. I don't want to, it's crazy. So now we're trying to figure out what to do with her and what to put in her house so this doesn't happen again, and line pool noodles up around the sink and things like that. So all those kind of things. Life is crazy like that. You never know what's around the corner. You never know what's around the bend. And such were the times with Jesus. That's the greatest segue ever. So if you're new to this, and I think that's the greatest thing about Storied Church, is we understand that we are the hodgepodge. We have people who have been in this faith thing for a long time, and have made the journey from conservative faith to progressive faith, or they're in that journey now, or people who have left this concept of faith for a long time and are now coming back to it and deconstructing, or we have people that don't know what they believe, and they're in the midst of it, and they're here, or they've been burned by religion, faith, whatever you want to call it, and they're here because community matters. We have all of that here, so if you're one of those people, welcome. And if you're not one of those people and you fit somewhere on that spectrum that I didn't talk about, welcome. If you read through the life and times of Jesus and the stories that were told about him and the stories that he tells, you'll always find something unexpected, something you never saw coming. The Jewish people, the Jewish rabbis called it, I can't remember the Hebrew phrase for it, but they called it the facets of faith. And basically they were saying, no matter how you turn a diamond, you'll always see something new, every single time. And so, find a YouTube video of somebody turning a diamond, and you keep looking at it, and it's always something new. It's like when I was a kid and those kaleidoscope things, and you could turn it, and maybe you would see something new every once in a while, but then you would kind of shake it and change everything up. And I can remember, my kids now, they would not understand, but I can remember just minutes on hours just fiddling with this thing to see what designs I can make and things. The most unexpected stories or themes or motifs or phrases that come out of stories from Jesus are the unexpected answers and unconventional wisdom that comes from Jesus himself. Think about it this way. We have a ladder here. My boys watched the Royal Rumble last night and this morning. And so when my son Micah saw this ladder, he was like, mostly because he wanted to climb it, but he also has seen wrestling matches that involve ladders, and he loves those because pain. And actually right behind my mom's house, probably like 10 miles down the road, the Hardy Boys grew up in Cameron, which is right behind where I grew up. And so they are famous for these ladders. And so, but we have ladders, right? And a lot of times when you see a ladder, you think of a construction person going up, a painter going up, things like that. But in the business world, it's this idea of ladder to success, right? Some kind of A plus B equals C thing. You have to do a certain thing to be a sort of success, and all sorts of things. You have to do something, be a certain way, do a certain thing in order to be successful. And Jesus comes around and says, nah, that's not actually how this goes. I mean, Jewish rabbis would tell people this. They would have to bring sacrifices. You would have to bring a certain sacrifice at a certain time and follow these certain laws and be a certain way and clean yourself a certain way and clean yourself at certain times and go to these festivals and go to these things and then maybe, right? And Jesus says, nah. Or you have to be with people a certain way or be with a certain type of people or, make sure you wash yourself after you be with a certain group of people. And Jesus is like, nah. Jesus says, nah. And this is where I need your help because this is going to be tricky. So Jesus takes this ladder. We're going to go that way, I think. And we're going to have to go backward. That way too, yep. There. All right, let it go. I think it's going to come my way. Yep. Don't worry, I've done this message before, or done this sermon before, maybe. Y'all pretend it's straight. How about that? Good thing we're not on Facebook Live, right? Yeah. Y'all pretend it's straight. That's straight. Pretend it's balanced and the ladder is reaching out. Keep that in mind. Jesus says not. Jesus says not to everything that the Jewish rabbis had told their people. He says the conventional needs to be turned upside down. The way we used to think about things, we need to turn that upside down. We need to flip that around. We need to do it differently. Every story he told, every example he made, every person he dealt with, had dinner with, talked with, walked with, was completely different than anybody that day had ever seen. The culture of his day and our day has that conventional thought process, right? Black and white. Be with these people, not these people. Believe this way, not this way. Up, down, left, right. It's always this dichotomy. I need to know how to get there. I need to know the A plus B to get here. My students are like that. What's the process? Instead of, how did we get to that process anyway? And how does that help what's coming up next and what's coming up down the line, here, there, and everywhere else. And so now Jesus, for the people in his day, for his disciples, for his followers, he's begun to turn things upside down. And instead of reaching up to a point where we reach some kind of success, or we reach some kind of pinnacle, where we reach some kind of popularity or notoriety, Jesus says, nope. Instead of reaching up to this goal that you think you should have, what you should be doing is reaching out. Everything you do, everything you say, every action we make needs to be reaching out, while also still reaching up and going out wider as well. Out, up, and wider. That's what the parables talked about. That's what the stories talked about. Trying to turn our current processes, our assumptions, our thoughts about things, turn them upside down. Let's say 15, because 15 is a good number. Let's say about 15 years ago, this process started for me. I was at a small church as a youth pastor in Dunn, North Carolina, which if you don't know where that's at, don't worry about it. If you know where Campbell University is at, you're close. If you don't worry about it. It's like God spit on a map. Seriously, it's like a small little place. And so I'm there, and Francis Chan, and it blows my mind that I would even mention that, but Francis Chan comes out with this book, Crazy Love, and I still love this book because it started me on this road of like this crazy, outlandish love that we could have for other people and also have for God at the same time. Love God, love people, nothing else matters. And Francis Chan just wrote pretty well about all of these things that dealt with how to love our neighbor in the most outlandish, craziest of ways. But, still with these barriers of these people, not these people, these people, not these people, these people, not these people. And so that's what kind of started me on this road of going from my conservative roots and now into my more progressive foundations now that I have, that I've deconstructed all these things. But that crazy love that Francis talked about sparks that for me. And then we go on and on and on. And when I read the Beatitudes and I read the parables, I keep seeing this kind of thought where no matter what, no matter the people, no matter what's happening in the world, we've got a crazy season of life coming up this year with election season and things like that. No matter what's happening, no matter what's going on in the world, my goal daily needs to be to reach outward. Outward. Constantly wider. Constantly wider. Jesus famously did this when he sat and he told these stories that we've been covering, and some of us for the last 2 weeks. When he would sit and tell these stories, he would sit on the ground with sinners. When he would tell these stories, he would sit at a table with sinners, which was a political term back in that day for people that they wanted to put down and not deal with and not hear from. Not so much that they were religiously other, it was more of caste system kind of stuff. You stay down. We don't want to hear from you. Your opinion doesn't matter because we run this. And so anywhere Jesus was, the sinners were around him, and everybody took notice of it because then they were like, he's unclean, he's not fit, he's not one of us, he's not this, he's not that. And neither are those people either. And so anywhere he sat, it was a party because these people never were noticed. And if they were, it was just to push them down further. And so when somebody would lift them up and invite them to a table, it mattered. And it was a party. And so I say to all of you, welcome to the party. Because in our prodigal story, Jesus was reminding us that no matter who we are, wherever we find ourselves in the story, we were at the party all along. All along. There was no decision that had to be made. There was no, terms and conditions that we had to check off that we never really read anyway, you know what I'm saying? There was never any of that stuff. Jesus said, come to the table and be with me. Done. Take a seat. Done. It wasn't rules and regulations. It wasn't terms and conditions. It was sit and be. Sit and be. And so in the prodigal story, he's reminding us of that, right? Because a son asked for his inheritance way too early. Taboo back in the day. But the father loves. The dad loves his son and says, hey, you know what? You want to do your thing, homie. Like, go do you. And boy, does he ever, right? The son goes out and does his thing. His things, his other things, his all the things. Blows it all. And the son comes back and he asks for grace. And not knowing what the dad would say, not understanding how the dad would feel about it. Not even a full amount of grace, just a little bit, just a drop. Doesn't even want all the things that he had before, just wants to be able to live comfortably once again. Just enough to feel alive. And the father does what most maybe could, but some could not do. And freely give grace to the son. I learned this from my own dad. From mistakes I made, where he could have wrung my neck and just read me the riot act. There were times when I did the small things, and I see it in myself all the time. I'm just like, ugh. There were times when the small things got on his nerves more than the bigger things. And it was just wild to me. But in those moments, no matter what they were, he reminded me later on when we would wrestle around or when he would hug me, things like that he still cared, that there was still grace to the fullest amount because I was his child. And the older son couldn't figure this out. The older son could have cared less about the inheritance because he knew it was coming at some point, but he didn't understand why, the father was giving grace out for free. Because the son had done everything right. He had worked his tail off. He had done all the right things. He had worked his way into the grace of his father, or what he thought should have been the grace of his father. And the father says, I don't know why you decided to do that. Because you were at the party the whole time. You've been in my presence. You've been in my house. You've done all of life with me the whole time. We have servants around, you didn't have to do a whole lot. You were with me the entire time. The grace has been yours the entire time. No work needed for it. The grace of God is the greatest of all parties to be a part of. Whether you're the host, because I can imagine the father, and I was going to Google how far can the eye see and recognize something? Because I can recognize faces pretty far off, and I'm like, oh, there comes little Billy Joe down the hall. Let me turn. There's a couple every once in a while, and or I'm like, hey, I haven't seen them in a while. I don't remember their name, but I know their face. At some point, hopefully in this moment, I'll remember it. I don't know, but I know their face. I could recognize somebody from pretty far. May not be able to remember their name, but I'm human. But I wanted to Google it because, the story goes, the son or the father saw his son from far, far off and took off like Usain Bolt at the Olympics. And I can imagine, the clothes kind of ripping off of him, right? And it's this epic story of, he's down to his tunic and he gets to his son and, he's holding on to things so that he can wrap the coats and the clothes onto his son to remind him of the grace and the love that has always been his. So whether you're like the dad and you're the host of the party, or whether you're coming back to the party, or whether you've been here the whole time and you just haven't experienced that grace that is a party, or whether you are allowing yourself to experience it for the first time again, or you're allowing yourself to experience it all over again, we welcome you to the party that is grace. So you got some choices. How wide? This is the challenge, right? Because there are people in this world that are just like, but do they deserve grace? Like, do I really have to love that kid? Because, gosh, he gets on my nerves during class. How wide are you willing to let the love and grace of Christ extend? I was asked during an interview one time, there's this passage in the Bible that talks about, that says, I think it's Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he's like, hey, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom, and who you let in is in, and who you keep out is out. And during the interview, the guy, they were just asking me like all these random passages out of the Bible and what I thought about them, and I was like, that's a really good question. But to this one, I was like, I'm pretty sure it means like we are given the opportunity to show grace and love to every single person, and they have the opportunity to feel it and get into it and be invited to the table. And he was like, nope, that's wrong. And I was like, okay, cool. How far are you willing to let the love of Christ, the grace of Christ extend? Because Jesus has flipped upside down the thoughts that we have had all along about the boundaries that love and grace can have. And how far are you willing to go to bring the party to someone else? What obstacles will you decide to overcome? What doubts will you decide to lay aside? In some cases, how far will you strain your eyes? How far will you run towards someone else? The challenge each and every Sunday, the challenge each and every day, especially for a teacher, is to bring ourselves, which is sometimes hard, to bring ourselves and also someone else to the table so that they can experience the party with us. So I invite you today, tomorrow, the rest of the Sundays that you ever come, I invite you to the party that is the grace of our Christ.
Again, we want to thank you for listening today to the Storied Church podcast. We really hope that we get to meet you soon. And again, you can visit us at storiedchurch.org, or you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We hope that you have a wonderful week. Hi, everyone. It's Jason again. And before you go today, I just wanted to take one moment of your time. Maybe you are a regular attender at Storied Church, or somebody that has found our podcast and you're just listening and you find it valuable. I just want to ask a huge favor. Our church is located in North Carolina, Alamance County, and we are one of the only open and affirming, reconciling, progressive, whatever word you want to label on that church here in Alamance County. And so we're just a really important voice of hope in this place. Every organization, including ours, takes funding, and the church has changed, and so we're trying to be creative in our funding. But I know it's a different ask, that especially if you don't live here in North Carolina. But if you would support us or consider supporting us with a one-time gift or even a monthly gift, it would mean the world. And thank you so much for even considering. You can give by going to storiedchurch.org/give. I hope you do. We would love your partnership and your friendship. Thanks again. And we hope to meet you soon.